The neon lights flickered against the damp walls, casting long, rhythmic shadows that danced with the hum of the spinning gears. Outside, the town continued its relentless whispers, calling the work inside a descent into madness. Milo ignored the talk. He stood near the workbench, watching the professor pace. Orion stopped, his breath hitching as he gripped the edge of a heavy canvas sheet. With a sharp tug, he pulled it away. Beneath lay a massive metal sphere, spiraling with thick copper coils that seemed to pulse in the low light. The machine occupied the room, pushing the boundaries of the crowded space. Orion traced the cold surface, his fingers lingering on the intricate wiring. "A real-time machine," he whispered, the words barely cutting through the mechanical drone of the lab. He stepped toward the control panel, his hand hovering inches above a heavy, rusted iron lever. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a static that made the hair on Milo's arms rise. Orion looked at the lever, then back at Milo, his jaw set in a line of absolute resolve. The final test was seconds away. Orion slammed his palm down, locking the iron lever into place. A low vibration rattled the workbench, quickly rising to a shrill, piercing whine. Blue electricity erupted from the coils, arcing wildly toward the ceiling in jagged, blinding forks. The metal sphere began to spin, blurring into a solid ring of light. A deafening crack echoed through the laboratory, like stone shattering under immense pressure. The floor beneath them liquefied, turning into a swirling, translucent vortex that pulled at their gravity. Milo grabbed the edge of the console, but the ground vanished entirely, dropping them into a tunnel of rushing white noise. The sensation lasted only a heartbeat before a sudden, jarring halt slammed them onto solid metal. The hum of the lab was gone, replaced by the distant, rhythmic pulse of a city. They stood on a high observation platform. Below them, silver towers pierced the clouds, and sleek, silent vehicles drifted through the air like ghosts. A holographic screen flickered to life in the center of the walkway, displaying the date, the 18th of June, 2145. Orion stepped toward the edge, his eyes wide as he stared at the horizon. "The future," he exhaled, the gravity of the displacement settling in as the wind whipped across the platform. The silence of the Silver City was unnatural. It was a vacuum that seemed to hold its breath. Orion reached out to touch a metallic railing, his fingers tracing the smooth, seamless surface of the future. Then, the air shattered. A siren, sharp and dissonant, began to wail from the heights of the towers, reverberating against the glass and steel. It was not a warning for the city, it was a tracking beacon. A voice, synthesized and cold, boomed from the clouds above. "Warning, temporal breach detected." The words vibrated in their chests. Orion froze, his hand dropping from the railing. Above the platform, the clouds parted. 3 black objects detached from the haze, dropping with lethal precision. They were drones, sleek and faceless, with crimson sensors that swept the platform like searchlights. The lights locked onto Orion and Milo, pulsing with a steady, rhythmic red. The wonder of the new world evaporated, replaced by the immediate, crushing weight of a hunt. The drones accelerated, their thrusters hissing as they closed the distance. Milo shifted his weight, his muscles bunching to spring. The city was no longer a place of discovery. It was a trap that had just snapped shut. Orion turned and bolted. Milo followed, his paws skidding against the polished metal of the platform. Behind them, the air hissed as a blue beam scorched the surface, melting the alloy into bubbling slag. They hit the main grid of the city, a labyrinth of interconnected walkways. Every step was a gamble. Another blast struck the ground just inches behind Milo, sending shards of heated pavement into the air. They sprinted past rows of silent, towering structures, their lungs burning from the thin, recycled air. The drones hovered above, their red sensors sweeping the grid with mechanical efficiency. A third blast vaporized a staircase right in front of them, forcing a sharp, chaotic detour into a narrow, dark opening. Orion stumbled, his grip on the concrete slipping, but Milo slammed into him, pushing him forward. They rounded a corner, heartbeats hammering against their ribs. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the darkness of a recessed bay. A firm grip locked onto their arms, yanking them off the grid and into the freezing chill of a hidden alleyway. The transition was violent, pulling them out of the line of fire just as the drones roared overhead, searching for heat signatures that had suddenly vanished into the gloom. The air in the alley tasted of rust and stale moisture. Lyra pulled them deeper, her eyes darting between the shadows and the flickering light of the main grid. She pressed a finger to her lips, listening for the hum of the drones. After a long minute, she turned to them. Her voice was barely a rasp. "You are not from here," she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Orion leaned against the damp brickwork, his heaving. Lyra shook her head, her expression hardening. Time travel is a capital crime in this era. The government monitors every ripple in the flow. If the Time Authority catches the scent of your arrival, they will not arrest you. They will erase you. She gestured toward the distant, glowing towers that loomed over the city. They scrubbed the existence of offenders from every record, every memory, and every timeline. You are ghosts that shouldn't exist. She paced the narrow space, checking the corner again. The drones are just the beginning. The Authority has teams that hunt specifically for temporal signatures. If you stay in the open, you are already dead. She turned back to them, her gaze sharp. You need to vanish, or the future will ensure you never had a past. Lyra guided them into the bowels of a derelict power station. The air here was thick with the smell of ozone and damp rot. In the center of the chamber sat the machine, a jagged assembly of metal and glass. Orion dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he reached into the exposed guts of the device. He twisted wires together, his fingers fumbling against the cold copper. Milo paced the perimeter, his ears swiveling toward the entrance. Every few seconds, Orion paused to wipe sweat from his eyes, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. Suddenly, a rhythmic vibration shuddered through the floor. The sound of heavy boots striking metal grating rang out from the tunnel entrance, echoing through the hollow space. Clang, clang, clang. The sound was deliberate, slow, and closing in. Orion did not look up, his movements turning frantic. He jammed a loose connection into a socket, the metal groaning under the pressure. The machine let out a low, rising whine, a sound that competed with the encroaching footsteps. He was running out of time. The boots stopped just outside the heavy steel door. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the steady, rising hum of the power source. Orion locked the final connection and pulled his hands back, his chest heaving as the metal structure began to glow. The heavy steel door buckled inward with a scream of tortured metal. Before the echoes died, the entrance was filled with movement. Soldiers flooded the chamber, their boots slamming against the grating in a synchronized rhythm that shook the floor. They fanned out with practiced precision, leveling long-barreled rifles that hummed with stored energy. Every exit was covered. Every shadow was illuminated by the harsh, sweeping beams of their weapon lights. Orion stood frozen, his hands still hovering inches from the machine. He did not move, his gaze locked on the lead officer who stepped into the center of the room. The officer raised a hand, and the soldiers tightened the circle, their rifles tracking every breath the trio took. "Step away from the device," the officer barked, his voice cold and amplified by a mask. The command vibrated through the floorboards. Milo pressed his weight into the ground, his back arching. He bared his teeth, a low, guttural hiss radiating from his throat. The officer tilted his head, his finger tightening on the trigger. The air in the station turned static with tension. The standoff held for a heartbeat, a singular moment of total stillness before the impending surge of force. Lyra did not wait for the order. She lunged toward the wall, her shoulders slamming into the heavy power breaker with enough force to rattle the entire structure. The lever dropped. The station screamed. A massive discharge of white light tore through the room, blinding enough to turn the shadows into solid walls of static. The soldiers shouted, their movements turning erratic as the floor pulsed with raw, surging voltage. Sparks showered from the ceiling, hissing as they touched the metal grating. Orion saw his chance. He grabbed Milo, his knuckles white, and hauled him toward the center of the chamber. A shimmering, jagged rift had ripped open in the air, a swirling void of light that defied the geometry of the room. The heat was immense, searing the very air they breathed. Soldiers clawed at the air, losing their footing as the gravity in the room shifted toward the tear. Orion did not look back. He shoved Milo forward and threw himself into the brilliance. For a fraction of a second, the entire future city, the drones, and the shouting voices stretched into a thin line of color. Then, the rift snapped shut, and the station fell into a sudden, jarring silence. The momentum of the jump carried them forward, sending them sprawling across the rough, wooden floorboards of their original laboratory. Orion hit the ground hard, his breath leaving him in a sharp, painful wheeze. Milo tumbled beside him, scrambling to his feet with a frantic, chattering sound, his claws clicking against the timber. For several long seconds, neither moved. The air was cool, smelling of ozone and old paper, utterly devoid of the metallic, electrified scent of the future. Outside, the steady, rhythmic tapping of rain against the window panes returned, a sound so ordinary it felt surreal. Orion pushed himself up, his hands shaking as he gripped a workbench for stability. The machine stood before them, but it was a hollow shell. The copper coils were fused, blackened by extreme heat, and the central sphere sat motionless and cold. It was dead. The hum of the neon lights had ceased, leaving the room in a dim, heavy gloom. Orion pressed his back against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor. He wiped a smear of grime from his forehead, his chest rising and falling in rhythmic, ragged gasps. They were back. The silence of the house pressed in, thick and absolute, confirming that the portal had finally closed behind them. Orion turned his head, his gaze sweeping over the scattered metal shards and shredded wiring that littered the floor. The relief of being home began to erode, replaced by a cold, prickling sensation at the base of his neck. His eyes snagged on something glinting near the base of the primary support beam. It was not a piece of his machine. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and picked up the object. It was a solid, silver badge. He turned it over, the light from the window catching the intricate, stamped seal of the Time Authority. The metal felt impossibly heavy in his palm. His pulse hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that drowned out the steady rain. He looked at the jagged hole where the portal had been, then back at the badge. The seal was clean, untouched by the heat that had fused his own equipment. A realization took hold, sharp and absolute. The portal had not closed the moment they jumped. Something else had slipped through the rift while the energy was still tearing the fabric of the room. Orion stood up, his legs stiff, his eyes darting toward the shadows in the corner of the lab. He was no longer alone.